This is about being mellow.
You may not always see marijuana, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
You smell it anywhere you go today.
And that smell is pretty distinct.
You smell like a dog poop.
Like a skunk, I guess.
Skunk.
I think that's accurate.
Some say there's more of it wafting through the air.
Definitely.
We won.
Since Mainers voted to legalize marijuana for recreational use last November.
It's definitely more obvious now since it got passed.
I probably smell like it right now.
The Maine Municipal Association tells the I-Team it's one of the most common complaints about pot, and several police departments agree. In Augusta, police say out of 20 marijuana-related calls this year, 13 have been about the odor. Lewiston police say their call logs show at least 50.
I think the most thing that we hear is an increase of complaints about the smell and the odor of marijuana, burnt or growing.
Lieutenant David St. Pierre says most come from the dense downtown neighborhoods.
More often than not, it's a landlord-tenant issue.
Britt Vitalia says some of his tenants in Portland have complained about their neighbors right down the hall.
And it was bothering them, and it was in the morning, and they didn't want their apartment to smell like weed and like someone is getting high.
As president of the Southern Maine Landlord Association, Vitalia says he's not alone.
It's incredible. I mean, down the hall, you've been outside the building and you can smell it. So at what point does smell rise to the level of being a nuisance?
It's a complicated question, and one Maine cities and towns will likely have to tackle. The legalization bill recently vetoed by Governor LePage largely left individual municipalities to deal with odor control at marijuana establishments and homes.
It's definitely a quality of life issue, I would say.
Matthew Sturgis is the town manager in Cape Elizabeth. He says it's an issue on his radar.
One neighbor may say that you're impacting me adversely and maybe also impacting adversely the value of my property.
The city of Denver in Colorado requires all grow facilities and product manufacturing businesses to submit an odor control plan. Their latest ordinance says 5 complaints about a facility within 30 days will also trigger enforcement. Here in Maine, the city of Sanford drafted an ordinance establishing standards for home cultivation, which was submitted to the state as part of testimony on the legalization bill. In it, the city limits the area on each property that can be used to grow marijuana and says odor can be considered a public nuisance if it's, quote, disturbing to people of normal sensitivity or leads to more than 3 responses from law enforcement in a 1-year period.
And that may be the way to go about doing it, similar to noise complaints.
Sturgis hopes communities will also be able to address odor through land use.
Some things may be allowed, some things may not be allowed, based on the size of the lots, based on the composition of the neighborhood.
These local decisions are being delayed until the state adopts regulations. So that stench on the street,
I think it's very annoying,
is here to stay.
It don't bother me.
Marissa Bodner, CBS 13 News.
I'd really like to get off the opiates.
65-year-old Susan Deschen has a neurological disease, a spinal injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, and uses a wheelchair.
That's the kids. Philip is now on 8 medications, and with the CBD, if that could get rid of the rest of the tumor, he could get off of almost all of that medication.
Her son, 42-year-old Philip, had a baseball-sized tumor behind his eyes. Removing it left him almost completely blind and with a lot of pain.
With us being able to grow, we could save a few hundred, a month, while still being able to afford those things that we need to afford.
As medical bills pile up, they decided to start growing medicinal marijuana to cut back on prescription drugs and the money spent on them. Susan and Phil both have medical marijuana cards, so it's legal in Maine. The problem is they live in a federally subsidized building and marijuana isn't federally legal. The landlords found the plants in an August inspection, and now they say they want them out.
Not trying to grow it to sell it, I'm just trying to grow it to make some medication. Not trying to build an empire.
We went to the landlord, Preservation Management in South Portland. They directed us to guidance by Housing and Urban Development, which states that known users of marijuana are supposed to be turned away before renting. However, property owners can decide whether existing tenants who start using marijuana can stay or go.
This is for medical, and we're not out there getting high.
The Deschennes received an eviction notice earlier this month, and Preservation Management Company is bringing an eviction hearing to court in order to force them out of the building. In Lewiston, Alexa Mislowski, CBS 13 News.
Packaged up and ready to go.
We were out every other day for a few weeks, and now we're out every single day.
Logan Martin Fisher is taking cannabis on the road.
We can meet at your house, we can meet at businesses, wherever you want.
His company, Elevation 207, was started back in February.
Now it's legal, we can sort of come out into the light and become a legitimate business.
He'll deliver all kinds and amounts, and while the weed is free, his services are not.
The delivery service is sort of like its own company, and the weed is free through our, through the caregiving company.
Fisher says he charges anywhere from $75 to $250, depending on how much you want.
I have a hard time arguing that it's actually legal.
Attorney Tammy Snow advises marijuana businesses here in Maine and says this is a gray area in the law.
If this were to go to trial, I think they would look at what a reasonable person believe was happening, and a reasonable person would say, you're not paying for the delivery, you're paying for the cannabis.
But Fisher says they've been cautious and even says local police haven't interfered.
A couple encounters in the last few years, and that's kind of shown me that they don't really care that much anymore.
While the laws sort themselves out, Fisher says he's happy to be opening up doors for many.
We're delivering to people's grandparents that, if you saw them on the street, you would never ever think that they're the ones that are going to be buying so much weed.
But lawyers say there's still a liability.
They see a money-making opportunity, but it is going to be legal. Hold off. I don't think that it's worth the risk.
In Portland, Dan Lamparello, Fox 23 News at 10.
Butterscotch.
This century's gold rush
Can I smell all of these?
is a little more green than the last one.
Most investors that do understand that stay away from it.
At the 2017 Maine Cannabis Convention, the state's marijuana-entrepreneurs are preparing for the legalization of recreational sales.
Everybody keeps saying that this is a $1 or $2 billion business for Maine. The object for a show like this is to keep as much of that money in Maine as possible.
Thank you.
For the state as a whole, all that glitters isn't gold.
This is not a panacea for Maine's budget issues by any means.
Over the summer, State Senator Roger Cates and a few members of the Marijuana Legalization Implementation Committee visited Colorado. According to the annual appropriations report from the state, retail marijuana taxes in Colorado generated $40 million towards school construction.
We're hoping we're going to be able to generate something in the neighborhood of $15 to $20 million a year in taxes.
And while it's more than what a state can find in its couch cushions, local leaders say it's not enough to build with.
We've had one individual report that there'll be sufficient revenue come off from this to repair all of our streets and roads. We have not seen that in any of the mathematical modeling that we've done.
The amended legalization bill that just died in the House features a 10% excise tax and a 10% sales tax on recreational marijuana sales. Now, of that tax revenue, 82% goes towards the general fund, with 5% going back to the towns or cities with pot shops or social clubs.
The local component, the amount of money that would come back to a local municipality, does not equate to the impacts that they have to deal with.
Sanford City Manager Stephen Buck says they'll be lucky to break even, a far cry from Colorado.
Colorado has a much different excise and taxing structure on the product that's being produced there than what Maine is proposing.
Kate says legislators have yet to debate changing appropriations. 7 bills were submitted in the 2017 regular session of Maine legislature, centered on either rededicating or raising sales taxes on retail pot.
The higher you raise the cost of the product, the more you drive people to the illegal market, and we certainly don't want to be doing that.
The current law reads that residents will be able to acquire licenses to sell recreational marijuana on February 1st of next year.
It already is black market $2 billion. We're just not taxing it and benefit from it.
Leaving little time for legislature to sort out the gold rush.
Sure, there's been some frustration with the length of this process, but there's been a tension here between trying to get something done very quickly and trying to get something done right.
In Portland, Dan McCarthy, Fox 23 News.